What's up? I'm Dan Fredenberg, and this is another Chance Encounter. Hey, what's up? I'm Dan Fredenberg. I'm a commercial real estate guy. I'm from the internet. Power lines that are just kind of close. What's up again? This is Dan Fredenberg. I'm joined today with Dan with a name that's even scarier for me than my last name, Kryzanowski. Is that
Perfect. Wow, you must be in Michigan or Canada when you say it like that.
I suppose, yeah. That's I like that you actually caught that accent from that because that's something my accent is usually custom. So there you go. But anyway, if you haven't seen one of these chance encounters before, this is what we do. I interview commercial real estate investors, in other words, my peers, and I say, all right, there are five different motivations that I've found that people may have for wanting to get their next commercial property. Which one of them or what combination best describes you? And then I pull out my Dan Does Deal die and I go through the six different roles in a commercial deal, either acquiring it, operating it, or flipping it. And I say, which one is you? But speaking of who are you, the most important thing for your own success is being able to effectively introduce yourself. So, Dan, can you please introduce yourself for the audience?
Absolutely. Dan Kryzanowski, native of Scranton, PA, here in Austin, Texas. My superpowers include self-directed IRAs and self-storage. I've been a passive investor for the past decade across all asset classes and have raised eight figures of dollars also across multiple asset classes.
All right, excellent. So there we go. We'll unfold that for any of you beginners who don't know. But the first thing that I'll do is I'll pull up the presentation. Don't call it a slide deck or PowerPoint or whatever it is. So if I hit this, then it pops up on the screen and boom. All right, so I go through the motivations first because beginners don't really know what role they're likely to play in the acquisition, the operation, or the flipping of an apartment complex, but at least they know why they're doing it. So that's why I start here. So the first motivation I found is to preserve purchasing power. So if you have a family office, or basically the way you make ends meet is based off of the cash flow from your assets or your wealth, then your big pain point is going to be inflation. You're going to need to be making more acquisitions just to make sure that you're staving off the effects of inflation and you're preserving your purchasing power. So that's the first reason that people might have. The one that I have personally is I'm trading time for wealth. My background is in technology, which puts me on the higher earning side of things. And one of the problems with being a high earner is that means you're also a high income tax payer. And so I'm going like, well, what if I pivot my tech skills into getting onto these GP teams, getting rewarded in the form of equity? That makes a whole lot more sense than giving half of it away to the government first and then whatever is saved, dumping that into the assets. So that's what I'm up to. The next motivation is the most common one. People want to fast track their retirement. Dan, you already said that you're already a passive investor, so that's
Mhm.
got to be in there somewhere. If you're in your early 20s and you're saying that you're fast tracking your retirement, I'm not going to believe you because that's just plain doesn't work. And the other thing is that when you say that you're fast tracking retirement, it means that there's an end in mind. Okay. So maybe you'll become an accredited investor and then you'll want to live somewhere where the cost of living is super duper low. And then you can actually make that work. And that would be the fast track to retirement people. But the next group would be in contrast with them. They are ultra motivated to get generational wealth that they want their grandkids to never have to work in their day in their life, or maybe it's they need the biggest yacht in the pier or the skyscraper in the town. So they want to buy their entire hometown. It's pure ambition. These are very handy people to have in your GP team because they're not going to retire to a beach. And the next reason, the last motivation, is some people pick a sector of society, or maybe the environment, or animals, or some sort of charity, something like that, and they really want to help that group. And they realize that accumulating wealth is by far the most effective vehicle to make a social impact. So that's why they'd want to make more acquisitions and accumulate wealth. So those are the 5 different motivations that I've been able to find in people. So what combination of those describes you best, Dan?
Yeah, I think it's maybe I'm going to surprise you a little bit here. I think it's the first two.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as I said, my mom was a social worker. I think the fifth one would work. I'm just not wired that way, and that's fine. I love my hometown and to support, but I'd rather share education. I don't want to be this guy, especially that left and came back. I don't really see that way. Fast track retirement, sure, it's always good to, I think, to have a Roth. Don't pay taxes, but I don't really see myself stopping. I enjoy what I do so much and sharing the education, much like you, Dan, that I don't think I'll get to that. The two things here, and normally I would say time for wealth. So that's my number 2 is my answer eternally. Hey, here I am picking up a beautiful car today, and I can be with my 5-year-old later. Trust me, that beats a W-2, even if you and I pull some goose eggs on certain days. I love that. But I love the purchasing power versus inflation, and putting some kind of real numbers to it is like, hey guys, if you're tied in with the best of breed sponsor, and I've been on the return end as a passive investor, it's very likely you're going to get 20% in 1 year. It sounds crazy, but people take care of their investors. And then on the flip side, you want a fair amount of back end equity on your deals, because let's just say the government prints 100x, crazy example. Well, you want that 100x on your return. So I do think for folks, that purchasing power, particularly older folks versus inflation, it is wise to maybe have a 3 to 5 year term to have a cut of the back end.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a fantastic answer. So I think that it was also revealing as far as the way you think, and that's really what I'm hoping for in these Dan Does Deals interviews. But that brings me to the next section, which for people who are just getting into this is going to be particularly useful for you, because I'm going to go through the 6 different roles. So the first role I'm going to explain is the repositioner. Okay, so a repositioner looks at a whole whack of different deals, and what they're looking for is upside. In other words, how can they make more money from this property than is what is coming in right now? So they're looking to make sure it's like, okay, is this a good price? Is it a good vehicle? And they're saying, how can I make it make more money? And the 2 main tricks up their sleeves as far as ways to get upside are either more efficient operations. And I say more efficient, but I got these Benjamins going down the toilet because the money part is very important as well. So consumption is one thing, but the other one is bookkeeping is another part of operations. And then I've got a background in marketing, so I'd contribute to the vacancy rate staying very low, and those would all be very valid operations part that they can contribute. But right now, we're in the hottest real estate market in history, so more efficient operations probably won't be enough. So they're probably going to need a contractor team to make the units actually nicer. And then that way you can charge more in rent. That's upside. But if you're like me and you're from the internet, you're also going to need a local. You're going to need boots on the ground to take care of the place and be there in an hour or two, because that's not going to be me. And normally that's who people think of when you think of buying, owning, and operating a building, but there's still the financiers involved. So when the repositioner says, hey, I got this property, it's worth tens of millions of dollars. Hey, do you happen to have tens of millions of dollars to lend me? They'll say, okay, so there's the property. I got all those different parts here. Okay, but who's your sponsor? And sometimes in coaching programs, they kind of skip over this one a little bit, because it basically means an insider. If you are even Elon Musk and you want to buy a 350 unit apartment complex, somebody in the fold, if you want to get a loan, somebody in the fold has to own a similar asset. So somebody has to own a 350 unit apartment complex. There are a couple other things, like you have to bring a certain amount of liquidity, and you also have to have a balance sheet of at least the amount of the loan. But that is a commercial real estate deal. So Dan, as far as your core competencies, or what you're most likely to bring to your next commercial deal, what are they from those different sides?
Yeah, me personally, I think is repositioner. I have a good knack to see everything in a hyper segment, really to the nth degree, a la, go to market plan for my marketers out there. Separately, I think what's most important though is two things. Because I've been burned by this before, contractors. And trust me, they're just like any sort of supply chain or any sort of employee from hourly all the way up. It's tough to find folks and it's tough to keep them. And I think this really ties in with local because most likely your contractors are going to be local if you're not in that market. So I always think local is always something you need some sort of boots on the ground. But now I think it's especially important to frankly, Monday can come up. And if your local guy or gal is not there, and the team doesn't show up, you're SOL and you can be behind a few weeks. And then everything else we kind of talk about from the financing side to the sponsors trust, frankly, once again, are people going to want to stay on and be the good operator? You're going to be hunting for another, asset manager or apartment manager here. So with all that, I'd say be aware of the localness, but then also, and I think this is where we're going next, is kind of what asset class are you looking at? And I think when you can reposition, I think if you have the good DNA, the competency, the character, the reputation, it's relatively easier to reposition into a different asset class if necessary.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's and one of the things I like to keep track of. It's also because my freelancing and web development and all that sort of thing. I'm aware of the conflict of interest that comes in with developers because it's the same as web developers. What they're ultimately trying to do is they're trying to saddle that with some client with a five-figure project. In contractor, there'd be a lot more than five figures, but they want to get a big project so that that can hum along, but then they're interested in these little day jobs where they can take off for a couple hours and line their pockets a little bit, and that's a conflict of interest that doesn't really help anybody who's actually employing them in either of those situations. So it's a tough one for that, and I think that that's why I've been talking to more and more contractors who are interested in equity positions, and I love the fact that that conflict of interest disappears. They have the incentive to get the work done in a timely manner because they're going to be receiving the cash flow when that unit is actually rented out, and they're not going to cut corners on like the roofing, for example, because they know they're going to be on the hook when they need to replace it anyway. So it's just some things to think about. But as you mentioned, the next question is, what's your buy box? What's the ideal property as far as unit count, geographic areas, and the class, where it's easier for you to say yes than any other type of property there, Dan?
Yeah, and I'll answer. I'll give you two answers. No surprise, I'm here in Texas. Geography, people are moving here, and the reason why I'm going to share these two asset classes, I think it makes sense. The first is self-storage. For people that know me, I've been bullish on it, and I still think there's meat on the bone. I get it. A lot more people are in, but I would say 40,000 out of 50,000 storage facilities are owned by a mom and pop, grandma, grandpa, that probably have not done much on the operations and other things that we've talked about recently. That said, storage is not hard, but you kind of have to be around the sun probably 18 months to 2 years. I've been around about 10 years in this space. So that excites me. I like secondary, tertiary markets. You go to a downtown MSA, you're going up against public storage, paying like a sub 4 cap rate. No way, can't do it. Separately, especially in Texas, people, goods, we're all Amazon, last mile industrial. I love industrial properties at this point. And there's a variety of them. But in Texas, once again, folks that have been the boots on the ground, savvy operators for 3-4 decades, from a risk return standpoint, it's very risk favorable. And I would say also, kind of doing a play on your financing point of view, if you see something coded as return of capital, there's a very good likelihood you're not paying on the distribution stream. And then you're also getting a healthy back end, as we talked about at the beginning, preserving your purchasing power. So self-storage and industrial in Texas, I think, give you good cash flow. And then also, we'll call it a hedge for the back end when we get the profit split.
All right. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And you and I met through some meetups, and I found those through LinkedIn. Is that the best way to reach out to you, Dan? Is it through LinkedIn, or is there a website, or what's the best?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably best because I know I talked about a few things, and I like to meet the person instead of just selling a single thing. So please reach out on LinkedIn. Say you heard the two Dans. If you're a Dan also, fine, I'll prioritize you over everybody else. How about that? We'll do a trifecta here. But yeah, please reach out on LinkedIn. I'm very active on it also, and let's have a call.
All right, awesome. And one other thing for you in the camera there, which is if you look below my left hand, you'll notice that there's a red button, and it should make you angry because it says subscribe. And the only way to stop being angry about red buttons is if to click on them, and then it'll turn gray. And it won't cost you anything, so you don't have to worry about that. But what it does mean is that YouTube will start paying me for these videos instead of me paying for these videos, and that's better. It means that my videos might end up in your list of suggestions. It doesn't mean you have to click on them, but you've done me an enormous favor by clicking it. Just like Dan, you've done me an enormous favor by showing up on this chance encounter today. This has been fantastic, getting to know you a lot better.
Yes, sir. Have a great holiday.
All right, thank you.